Okay, so welcome everyone to today's live cast. Today we have Les Kletke on the line. He is a best-selling author, a book coach, ghostwriter, and professional speaker. And today we have for you actually a brand new topic I'm really excited to get us to dig into, and that is 7 questions you should ask before writing a book coach. So this is absolutely brand new material, never heard of or done before, so I'm really interested to hear some of the answers that Les is going to give us. Starting off with number 1, which is the what time frame will this be done in? So Les, in terms of the questions that people should ask before hiring a book coach, why is this question so important?
Well, and I don't know that just because it was number one on the list that we prepared that this is the most important. I think that people should look at the overall package, and whatever order you ask them in isn't as important. That you come away from your initial meeting with a book coach with answers to these questions, so that you can evaluate if this is the right person for you to work with. And you got to remember, this is a very important relationship. I liken it a little bit to dating. You don't necessarily marry the first person that you date, and the book coach that you meet the very first time is not the one that is right for you, or might not be the one that is right for you. So look at a series of questions and consider an interview that you're going through. What time frame will it be done in? Well, that's incredibly important, because you might be talking to someone who has 3 or 4 other projects on the go and can't get to you till the end of the year. And like so many tradesmen in so many areas, will conduct the first interview, get started on your project, and then not get back to the second stage, not get to working on it till later in the year. But you feel that you've committed and you don't want to go elsewhere. So get a firm commitment from the book coach in terms of how long they feel that it will take to work through the process, how long his system normally takes, and what time frame it is, so that works in your schedule. If you have a certain event coming up, a special anniversary, or a special date in your workplace, or you're changing careers and it's targeted around that time, make sure that the book coach will help you get through the process and include the time for editing and printing that's involved at the back end of this process. The coach should be right up front with you and talk about the other time frames that are required at the back end of this process. Make sure that the coach's time frame fits your time frame.
So in fact, you almost want to have an entire calendar laid out for you by the book coach. So not only does that set up expectations from your part in terms of how long the whole process is going to take, what to expect, so there's no surprises, but also so that the expectations of the book coach are met as well, in that the person also has this built into their calendar. Is that kind of what I'm hearing too?
Absolutely. It's a relationship. Both of you should be comfortable with it. Both of you have to be comfortable with it, because you're dealing with some fairly delicate matters. And if you're on edge that you've missed an appointment and it's getting later and you're behind, it's not going to go well. So you should have a time frame that you're comfortable with, and you should both have some flexibility, because there are days where it just doesn't work, and life gets in the way of writing your book. But you should have a time frame so that you know at least when the final manuscript will be completed, and when it'll be able to go to an editor, and when the print process is going to take place. But you should have some mile markers along the way, in terms of not just having a final date for the manuscript. You should know about how the interviews go, and when you'll get some feedback on it, and exactly how they will help you with the process of writing your book.
Well, and I can imagine it also maybe gets rid of some of the myths in the book coaching process. For example, coming in and thinking that, for example, in 21 days from our first session together, I'm going to receive a box of books on my front door too. I was thinking about writing this book over the next 5 years. What do you think about that idea?
And as a book coach, I have had both of those both of those scenarios presented to me, and we try to work on something that's in between for most. I with the system that I use, I say that you can write your book in 30 days, and you can publish it in 90 days. That's a pretty intense process, although it can work. It's not for everyone. What I do recommend is that you count on writing between 2 and 3 chapters a week, which allows you to write a book in about 3 months. That's probably more realistic for most people. As a book coach, I personally refuse to work with people who will not commit to writing at least a chapter a week. If you're on the 5-year program, it's difficult for me to keep interested in your project. I don't do a good job as your coach, and I know that you're not really committed. You're only going to get to it when there's nothing else happening. That's not going to be a good situation for either one of us.
Agreed. But moving on to the second question you should ask before hiring a book coach, and that is there a system that he or she uses? So can you start off by telling me, why this question is so important, and then share with us what system that you bring to the table when you're coaching your clients?
Well, the purpose of having a book coach is to help you write your book, to make it easier. So the system that I use is called ISRI, and it breaks each chapter down into 4 component parts so that we have some consistency in the chapter. Now, I don't for a minute believe that ISRI is the only system or the end-all and be-all. It's a system that works for me, and it works for many of my clients. Although I have had some clients who say, well, that's not really the way that they wanted to go, and move on. I believe that we are better off doing that early in the relationship than trying to fit them into a template that doesn't work. Look for a book coach that has a system and that has some flexibility that allows it to work with the book that you want to write. Overall, I recommend that a book be 50,000 words, and that's 25 chapters of 2,000 words each. So now each one of those 25 chapters has 4 component parts: the introduction, the story, the reason, the impact. We break it down into the 500-word parts. Each of those has a letter, ISRI, and we have the system in place that allows us to have consistent chapters, which is so important for the reader, because a reader doesn't want to have one chapter 30 pages long and the next one 4 pages long. Let's try to make it interesting. Let's try to make it easy for the reader to read, because ultimately that's who we're writing this book for.
Now, I mean, I wouldn't even know to ask if there was a system in writing in place with a book coach. To me, it's just like you just write a book, and that person then maybe acts like a accountability coach to read your stuff over, give you some suggestions. I mean, what do you do if you're talking with a book coach and they don't have a system in place, or a system in place that you don't think is doable? I mean, do you run? Do you walk?
Well, I think you should be tactful and say, I don't think this is going to work for us. It's not really what I'm looking for. Short answer is you should run away. But we're going to try to be more polite than that and say, well, this might not be for me, and it's not the situation that you want to be in. There should be a system that you can count on, because ultimately this is about making the writing of the book easier for you. So when you've asked about the system, the next question that you should ask about is, are there going to be interviews? How do you get the information? How does the book coach get the information from the client to put into the chapters? And a good coach is about finding the answers that are inside you. They're not going to provide you with, here's a template to write the book and here's the facts to write the book. The book is inside you, and a good coach has an interview process, an interview system in place that brings that information out and helps draw it out every single time, so that each chapter has the consistency in it, regardless of the issues that you're dealing with, that each chapter has the same flow, which then fits together to make the flow of the book. It's not a, I was feeling like this today, so I wrote that. I was feeling like that the other day, and that's why that chapter is in a different tone. That makes it very, very difficult for a reader. So we have to have a system in place that gets that information out. Ask about the length of the interview, the type of questions that they will ask.
From a practical standpoint, how are those interviews often conducted? You can't imagine that everyone that you work with lives near you. I mean, what are some of the ways you get to do these interviews? Do you do them in a really short period of time? You go visit them and do 30 interviews in like 3 days, or are they conducted over a longer period of time? How does that work?
Surprisingly, that's the way I started out and found that a very inefficient system. Traveled to the people and went with a very intense, actually the first client that I worked with, we'd schedule 6, 7 hours at a time and sit down and find out that we were both exhausted, and the last couple of hours weren't getting much of value accomplished anyway. So what I use now is an interview for each chapter that we're going to write. As I said earlier, I believe that a book is 50,000 words. That's 25 chapters of 2,000 words each. So I work with clients for an hour interview to develop the outline for the chapter and give them the outline for the chapter, and they write the words, they put it in their own tones and send me the chapter. And then at the beginning of the next session, we go over that chapter and ask about the writing process, how it worked, and I'll make some suggestions about how it could be improved, perhaps where they went into too much detail, where they didn't go into enough detail, where I'd like to know more, and we talk about the chapter that you've written before we start to write the next chapter. No use, there's no value in you writing half or 2/3 of the book before you get feedback and find out that you were going down the wrong road, or that something could have been much easier, much more simple. So let's work on that process right from the first chapter and go on and develop a writing system so that by the time you're into chapters 3 and 4, you're familiar with the book coach's system, you know the questions that they're going to ask, and it becomes much more of a comfortable conversation.
How do you remember the information after the interview? So you've done the hour interview, you're taking copious notes, you're not taking copious notes. How do you know what you talked about during the interview when you're sitting down and trying to write the book?
I take copious notes. That's my job as a book coach. I want my clients to just be in a conversation. So what I do is I record our conversation and send them an audio file at the end of our conversation. So they have that file that allows them to go back and make changes to an earlier chapter. They have that file that lets them listen to the stories that they told that will be included in today's chapter. And I also send them an outline that has word assignments broken down into 50-word values. So it says, use 100 words for this, use 150 words for that, use 200 words for this point, so that they're only writing 2 or 3 sentences to each point in an outline. And then when it all comes together, we've gone through the introduction, the story, the reason, and the impact, and it all comes together in a chapter that flows very well. So they have that assignment, but a lot of clients use the audio file to listen to again. Some just like it as insurance. They say that they've never listened to it, but it's very important for them to know that they have it, just in case they did have to listen to it. So it's a bit of an insurance factor.
Fair enough. Moving right along in the 7 questions you should ask before hiring a book coach, we have reason number 4. Now, I can't imagine someone that comes to you has not asked this question, and that is the cost. What is the cost? So tell me why this is so important to talk about up front, besides the obvious reason, and please continue.
Well, you're almost right. I have actually had a client commit without asking the cost. Fell in love with the process, knew that he wanted to write the book. We went through the interview. He said, what's next? And I said, well, we schedule the interview. He said, okay. and we started the following day with his book. But for most people, the cost is a real factor, and ask what the cost of the project will be. Ask how that fits into the total cost of the project. A good book coach should be able to give you an idea of what final production for a number of books will be, and what they're going to provide you for a certain dollar amount. Whether that's just coaching, whether they'll stay with you till you have a satisfactory manuscript developed, what you might have to look for in terms of editing or design for the book. It's a book coach. It's not just a writing coach. They should be able to answer your production questions, what's involved all along the way. And if they can't provide the information right off the top of their head, that's not an issue, but they should know where to find it, and they should be able to get you quotes from an editor and from a respectable printing house.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the costs don't necessarily vary a whole lot. Could not like an experienced book coach be able to tell you exactly what it's going to cost, for example, for the coaching process, for the actual editing process, the publishing of the actual hard books themselves? I can't imagine that changes a whole lot.
The one that is the greatest variable, and the one that I think is the most important in the process, is the editing. Depending on how you send the volume of work to the editor, and I have to admit that my editing costs are high. Sometimes my editor asks me if I type that manuscript with my mittens on, and that hurts me, but I get over it. So I believe that an editor can polish and can change, and I've worked with one editor for the last couple of years who understands me and knows what I want to say, not so much what I said, but what I intended, what I want to say. So I value that a great deal. Pierre Burton, who did a pretty good job as a writer, as a Canadian writer, would count on 1/3 of the project budget going to editors. So that's an important part, and that is what will vary the most depending on the condition of your writing, how good you are when you send it to the editor. But by and large, I know for myself, I have a pretty fair idea of in normal conditions what the cost will be, but there's also some questions I want to make sure before going in, because I've stumbled upon some situations where I assumed that it would be a normal situation for writing a book, and we all know what happens when you assume. It doesn't work out. So it ended up that the book was to be a surprise for this individual, so I couldn't actually speak to him. I had to interview people about him. The book was going to be a surprise for his 80th birthday party, and then I said, well, okay, I can work with that. I had put in a quote for the book, and I said I can work with that. And then they said, well, I said, well, usually there's a woman involved in this kind of situation, and they said, well, yeah, but he kind of left his wife with 10 kids and ran off with his girlfriend, so she's not really a good source on this one. So they can vary from book. That was an extreme situation and a business lesson learned early in the process.
Well, we'll dedicate a live cast at some other point in time to that one project. Sound fair enough?
We're just going to leave it. It was a learning experience, and we're moving on to other things now.
Okay. So speaking of moving on to we're now still discussing the 7 questions you should ask before hiring a book coach. And question number 5, you should ask about the format of the final product. Now, what does that mean?
Well, what is the coach going to do? And as I said at the earlier point, he's a book coach, not just a writing coach. He should be helping you with the entire process. For myself, when I work with clients, I stay with them till they have a satisfactory manuscript that is ready to go to the editor, and then I help them with finding an editor. I recommend some editors. They don't have to use the ones that I recommend, but at least I provide a list that will work on that specific topic. So you should know that, or you should find out whether the book coach is going to give you some feedback on your writing, or just tell you how to write. Whether you're going to get individual feedback, whether you will get a second chance to write those chapters and to go over them again with the improved version, or whether it's just a one-time we deal with the topic and then we're moving on. So find out exactly what shape your manuscript will be in when the relationship ends with the book coach.
All right, fair enough. And how far they're going to take you in the process, obviously, is what I'm also hearing, right? Correct?
Yes, yes, because ultimately you want to end up with boxes on your driveway, and how far in the process will the book coach help you with that?
Excellent. Okay, so continuing on with the 7 questions you should ask before hiring a book coach is question number 6, and that is references. And you made a little note here I thought was interesting, that someone that you can actually talk to, not just a past client list. So do you have some experience in this area, either good or bad, with other people telling you horror stories?
Absolutely, and I have with my clients. I ask if they're okay if I send other people to them, and I don't know what they're going to say, but I trust what they're going to say, and if they didn't have a good experience, they're going to tell people that. If they had a good experience, they're going to tell people that. So the fact that your book coach has worked with a number of famous people, that doesn't mean that they're good, and that doesn't mean that they're the right fit for you. Now, the fact that they haven't written any books on the particular topic that you are writing on doesn't mean that they're not a fit. In fact, that might be an advantage, because they're not bringing a bunch of baggage or predetermined knowledge from past projects. They're asking you the questions to help bring out the information that you want to get across, and not being heavy-handed and saying, well, you have to include this, or you should be talking about that, and strongly recommending the references that you should include. So ask your book coach if it's all right for you to talk to some previous clients that they have worked with, and don't be afraid to phone them and ask about it. And for heaven's sakes, don't just rely on an email. Pick up the phone and talk to them in person, because email is a great way to communicate when we don't have the other option, but you don't really get the feel of the person's voice and how it really went. And they may be a little leery of typing out the long messages, whereas when you're talking to them, you can ask about the overall experience. So contact those past clients.
Can you give us an insider's tip onto what kind of questions they should be asking those references? Like maybe 3, 4, 5 questions you think would be key to ask about potentially working with that book coach?
First question is, was it a positive experience? Did they help you? Did they make the process easier? How did it work in terms of the time frame? Were they punctual on the time frame? And did they provide a credibility coach aspect for you? Did they keep you on task? And are you happy with the final product? Because ultimately that is the taste of the pudding. Are you happy with the final product that you have?
Excellent, some great questions, thank you. So moving on to the final and last question that you should ask before hiring a book coach, and that is, it's about voice, about maintaining the integrity of your message. So tell me why you think this is so important, maintaining your voice throughout the story.
It's your book. You want it in your voice, and you want it in your story. Talk to the book coach and ask them, how are they going to make sure that they maintain the voice that you want, that they get your story? And this also includes, are you going to be one in a large class, or are they going to work with you individually so that they can help you keep your voice? There's lots of book coaches that are signing up classes of 30, and I know one particular book coach who says quite clearly on her website her goal is to work with 1,000 authors this year. Well, in my mind, that means that there's absolutely no individuality. They are not. She cannot possibly pay any attention to the individual. That's 3 a day. You can't, and that's a one-time deal. You can't possibly have any individual attention. That's signing up for a writing class. That's not a book coach. So ask about the steps that they will take to make sure that it's your story, and how many people they might be working with at a time, and if it'll be individual instruction.
Excellent, Les. Thank you very much. And I'm just in closing here, before we leave our listeners, tell me, of the 7 questions that we discussed today, which do you think is the most important of the 7 to ask before hiring a book coach?
Is there a process in place to keep this thing going so that we have some consistency throughout the chapters, and that will in fact lend itself to being timely and keeping on track? So ask about the system that the book coach uses to keep on track.
And have you had any, obviously these questions you think are really important, they come up after years and years of experience of working with people. Have you ever been at the other effect where someone's come to you after a really negative experience with a book coach, and you've had to deal with either their preconceived notions or pick up someone else's work and take it through completion?
Yes. And my recommendation or my approach to that is always the same. It's easier to start on a clean page, and I'm not saying that we throw the material away. I'm just saying, instead of trying to change someone else's work and make it fit, let's just acknowledge that you've had the life experience. We're still using your life experience, but we're going to write it with a new system. And in fact, my greatest fan, and he happens to be a personal friend, but my greatest fan, that's the only advice that I have given him as a book coach. He had attempted to write a book, had someone helping him with it, and he came to me and asked for help and to try to fit this into the ISRI system. He was now convinced that it would work. How could this be done? And the only advice that I gave him was, put that away. Don't even look at it. Start fresh. Start with a clean page, and now apply the introduction, story, reason, impact system. Put that material in. Put your stories into the new chapters. And he thinks I'm a brilliant book coach, and in fact, we've spent close to 5 minutes on the discussion of his book.
All right, well, it certainly brings to bear the importance of asking these questions up front and ensuring that the relationship, not only the book coach themselves is credible and experienced, but that the relationship you're going to have with the book coach is going to be something that's going to nurture that relation, not just the relationship between the two of you, but the process and the completion of the book itself. So thank you so much for sharing these really important questions. I hope that many of you take a look at these questions and consider at least some, or if not all of them, as you're thinking about writing a book and approaching a book coach to have you to facilitate that process. Now, obviously, it would be really difficult to have a book coach without offering some sort of a session or some ability to reach and connect with that person to find out if that person's the right person to work with. And Les, would you be able to spend some time with people so they wouldn't have to worry about getting too heavily involved with you before, if they're considering looking at a book coach, would they have an opportunity to speak with you at some level?
Absolutely. If I believe in the things that I've just said, then I have to follow through and offer you an opportunity to talk to me. And so what I'll do is I'll extend a 1-hour session, free session, to talk to me about being a book coach. And this is not a sales session where I will try to tell you or sell you on my system. This is an opportunity for you to interview me as a book coach and see if I'm a good fit for you, or to answer any questions that you might have about the book publishing process, or what's all involved. I stay with the idea that I'm a book coach and I'll help you with any aspect of the book business, not just the writing. That's my, I believe my strength is in the interview process. But if you want to interview me for an hour, Kevin, if you could provide the contacts at the bottom of the screen here, I'll offer a 1 hour free consultation to anybody who would like it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I will put a link down below this video so that when people, if they, those of you who are considering looking at a book coach, you owe it to yourself to take advantage of this incredible generosity on Les's part to basically speak with you about your project. There's no obligation, obviously, to continue with Les, but you certainly owe it to yourself to at least to talk with Les about your book project. So that link will be below the video. That's it for today's broadcast. Today we talked about the 7 questions you should ask before hiring your book coach with Les Kletke. He is a best-selling author, a book coach, as you obviously all know, a ghostwriter, and professional speaker. So thanks again, Les, and thank you everyone for watching.